Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome back to Monday School. Bo Prosser, Center for Christian Education. Bo and the Beard with you for another evening of Monday School Bible study, looking at the Smyth and Helwys formation lesson plan for Sunday, July the 7th, 2024. Looking at the book of Daniel for the next few weeks, apocalyptic literature at its best, and looking at how tonight Daniel stays true to himself and to his faith in the exile. The prophet Daniel lived in the 6th century before the birth of Jesus. During this same period of time, construction began on the Acropolis in Athens. Mayan civilization was flourishing in Mexico. Aesop wrote his fables. Confucius and Buddha were both active teachers. And the Greeks introduced the olive tree to Italy, which I found fascinating. Lots of creative energy at work in the world during the time of Daniel, and so true in the land of Israel and the Middle East as well. The purpose of the writing of Daniel was to inspire God's people to stay strong during the Maccabean Wars. So not only is this a book of apocalyptic literature, prophecy, if you will, but also a book of inspiration. God continues to call us to live in the strength of our faith when tempted to do the opposite. Many of us aren't willing to discipline ourselves to give witness to the guidance of God in our lives. In times of testing, many of us give in to the easy ways rather than summoning the strength of our faith. And as we are faithful, God leads us to new heights that we never thought possible. And so we enter into this book, for many of us, maybe not knowing a lot about the book of Daniel, other than Daniel in the lion's den, or maybe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into the fiery furnace. But there are lots of great lessons, and I hope to point out some of those both tonight and in the days to come as we study these words. You may or may not have noticed the world is changing. The culture in which we are a part of seeks the easy way out most of the time. It is easier to accept at face value a politician's statement. It's easier to drive through the fast food line rather than cook a healthy meal. It's easier to print money than to pay attention to a national debt. It's easier to create hype rather than to tell the truth. It's easier to get a shot for weight loss than to count calories. It's easier to deceive rather than to build relationships. It's easier to consume than to save. It's just easier in today's world. And you and I are being gently and not so gently in some cases deceived. It's subtle. It's not a painful shift, but it is immediate. And I fear With the easy ways come consequences. Daniel also experienced a choice in today's lesson. The easy way was to fatten up on choice wines and royal food. Daniel could have taken what the culture offered him so readily, but Daniel refused the easy path. Daniel decided that he would serve God faithfully, and so must we. And rarely is serving faithfully the easy way. God does not call us to the easy way. Jesus would not accept the easy way. Daniel rejected the easy way and stayed faithful. Culture says to us, pad the bottom line, take the easy way. Culture says to us, bully your opponent with bluster and take the easy way. Culture says to us, you had a bad day? Quit. Take the easy way. But we cannot take the easy way. While culture says to us, take the choice wine and the rich food, don't worry, be happy. While culture says to us, the only thing that matters is your portfolio and the goodness of what you grab for yourself. If it feels good, do it. Thankfully, Daniel chose a harder path. Thankfully, Jesus chose a harder path. What will you and I choose in the days that are upon us? As you enter into this lesson, I would revisit some of those subtle, easy choices that are in front of us. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that we may have reached for rather than working hard at what we really desired? What is the most profound lifestyle choice you might have ever made? And what were the sacrifices on the front end that you had to make in order for the blessings to come on the back end? Another way to enter into this lesson is to talk about blessings and lessons. In our family, whenever my girls would come home with a bad day from school or a bad day with their friends or a bad day in some of their extracurricular activities, we would talk about what were the blessings from that experience and what were the lessons of that experience. We never talked about quitting. We never talked about the easy way of avoiding whatever it was. We always tried to help them look deeper in their lives for the blessings and the lessons. And I'll never forget one day when I came home after an extremely bad day at work, as we sat at the dinner table and we were asking, how's your day? How was your day? How was your day? And my day was the pits. My daughters almost immediately picked up and said, Dad, where were the blessings in your day? What are the lessons from your day? It's always a blessing when your children pick up on the lessons and bring those back to you. Maybe you begin by asking your class, what are you thankful for today? And talk about how those things that we're thankful for came to us. I have wonderful adult children, but they didn't just poof up into adulthood with wonderful maturity. It's been a growth process. It's been a process where we have continued to parent them to some extent, where other people have encouraged them to some extent, where their husbands and other family have supported and loved them and encouraged them. We don't just wake up one day into maturity. It's filled with sacrifice. It's filled with focus. It's filled with a determination to sometimes do the hard things to get through to what you really want. And that's where we see Daniel this morning as we study together. Jehoiakim is the king of Judah. He was the Judean king who had been placed on the throne by Pharaoh of Egypt. His name means Yahweh raises up, but God did not raise up Jehoiakim. Pharaoh did. And Pharaoh gave him that name in many ways as a mockery to Israel. Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon. This was the mighty ruler of the Babylonian Empire. The name Nebuchadnezzar is a Hebrew transliteration of a Babylonian name, which means Nebu protects the crown. So what we have here is Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, protecting the kingdom, protecting the empire. And on the other side is Jehoiakim protecting Pharaoh of Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar came against Jerusalem because the Pharaoh of Egypt dared invade Babylon. In response, the young prince Nebuchadnezzar defeated the Egyptians, and then he pursued the fleeing army all the way through the Sinai. Along the way, or on the way back, he subdued Jerusalem, which had stayed loyal to the Pharaoh of Egypt. A little bit of history just to get in your head what's going on. Because, as I said earlier, very few of us are scholars when it comes to the book of Daniel. Daniel, remember, is written to inspire Israel to stay strong in their faith in Yahweh God. Also, it's interesting to note that Nebuchadnezzar and Jehoiakim would have several encounters. They were, if you will, the Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier of their day, except that Nebuchadnezzar won every encounter. The Lord gave Judah into the hands of the Babylonians for many reasons. The first was Israel's idolatry. Israel had dared to turn away from God and had cast their fate with Pharaoh of Egypt. And if you think back into the history of Israel, that would have been an abomination. After all that God had done for Israel when in captivity, now they rejoin in a way of thinking. They rejoin or cast their allegiance back to Pharaoh. God would have been incensed by that, I think. The second reason, not only their idolatry, but the second reason was their failure to observe the Sabbath, one of the main commands of God, because it is in the Sabbath where Israel reignited each week their fellowship with God. And when you ignore the Sabbath, you ignore fellowship with God. And so God said, okay, Israel, if that's what you want, here's what's going to happen. And the Babylonians came in fiercely and conquered Jerusalem. Then the next section, verses 3 through 8, Nebuchadnezzar demonstrated that he was a wise administrator and a shrewd tactician. He took control of Judah and wanted to keep their hopes broken. Taking the young men as hostages reminded Jerusalem and all of Israel that their future was being taken away from them. Taking these brave young men, these smart young men, away out of the picture as Israel, as Judah looks around, they see we don't have a future. Nebuchadnezzar breaks the will of the Jews. They are, these best and brightest are taken away, and they will be attempted to be brainwashed in Babylon. Jerusalem understands that their temple has been taken, and now their best and brightest men have been taken. There's no way they can revolt against Babylonian rule. Nebuchadnezzar not only confiscated the holy images of the temple, he also took the future, the heart of Israel away. When Daniel and his brothers are moved into Babylon, they are all given new names, and they are all moved into brainwashing mode, not as torture, more subtle than that. First of all, Nebuchadnezzar says, give these young Jewish men the same food and wine that we have in our royal palace. In the same way that our best and brightest in Babylon get to eat and drink with me, I want these young Jewish boys to eat and drink with me too. This was intended as a special honor. Again, do you see the subtlety of Nebuchadnezzar? He was very subtle, and he made shifts in ways that were calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to dash the hopes, not only of those back home, but of these that he'd brought into Babylon. So he gave them all new names. You're not to think of your old names anymore. And don't worry about all that food you used to eat. Now you have the richest meat and the choicest wine. he begins very subtly to break down these young men. Having the same food and drink would have been considered an honor. It would have been hard to say no thank you to the king. Nebuchadnezzar was going to take their minds. They were going to be re-educated. He was going to take their bodies. They were going to be broken down with this rich food. He was going to take their heritage. He took their names away. And if he could, he was going to take away their bodies. He knew the Jews were hard-headed, stubborn people. He knew they thought of themselves as God's chosen people. And so he wasn't going head to head with that and argue about it. He was just going to manipulate these captives. So he gave them food and new names and education, all to indoctrinate them with the idea that these young men would leave behind Hebrew culture and Yahweh, the God of their nation. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to communicate to these young men, look to me for everything. If there's anything you want, I will give it to you. You want great food, I'll give it to you. You want great wine, I'll give it to you. You want good places to stay, I'll give it to you. You want the best minds to educate you, I'm going to give you that. The good life, my friends, you are not here as captives. But Daniel refused, insisting instead that they would look to God. Daniel made a big deal over a little thing. The only way to go on with God is to stay faithful. Daniel realized that his relationship with God touched every area of his life, including what he ate. And so he decided not to defile himself. So please, sir, might we just have vegetables? We appreciate what the king is doing, but just feed us vegetables. And then at the end of our education, measure us against the ones of Babylon and see how we measure up. And if we don't do as well, then we will do what the king has asked. Daniel was courageous. This was a dangerous request, but Daniel found favor with his superiors. And so they said, all right, you want vegetables? Fine, here you go. You want to eat nuts instead of meat? Fine, here you go. You see, Daniel knew this meat had been sacrificed to the gods of Babylon. Daniel knew this wine had come at a high cost to be made for the king. And so rather than being seduced, Daniel said, no thanks. So what does Daniel's word have for us today? I'm afraid we are in a similar kind of culture. I'm afraid we are dangerously close to being seduced. I'm afraid we're dangerously close to being bullied. I'm afraid that many of us have abandoned the faith for the easy way. These words from Fran Pratt may be a prayer for us. God, We live in soul testing times, times when evil is cloaked in politics and religion, when moral failing as a catastrophe is normal and swept away, when lies are told more often than truth, and we are not able to discern the difference. God, give us strength. Daniel and his Jewish brothers must have prayed that prayer as well. God, give us strength. I pray that prayer for me and for all of us today. God, give us strength that we might see the subtle differences, that we might hear the half truths, that we might see the easy way that's being projected upon us, and we might have the courage to say, we will serve no God but Yahweh. May it be true for us. Pray together. God, forgive us when we are easily seduced. Forgive us when we are easily swayed. Forgive us when we bow to the bullies around us rather than standing up to them. Forgive us, God, when we abandon the faith that has served us so well. Forgive us when we take the easy way. God, give us strength. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody. This is going to be a great series, and I think you're really going to enjoy living into it. Lots for us to learn, lots to think about, and in the end, I think you're going to enjoy it. Daniel has words for the living of these days, so let's pay attention and see what happens. Hey, I'm just an old country boy from the middle of Georgia, and I decided to shave my head and grow a beard. What do I know about anything? But I know this: Monday school is fun, and I love being with you. Thanks for joining me, Bo and the Beard, the Center for Christian Education. We'll see you next week.